29 will be the invitation song this afternoon or this evening after our study. I'd like to invite you to turn in your Bibles with me to the book of Ecclesiastes. Rick was all ready to read from the book of Ecclesiastes, and I tricked him. I know that in the lesson, that's what it says, Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verses 1 through 11. This is going to serve as an introduction to a series of lessons from this book. Matthew chapter 6 and verses 19 through 24 is, I think, Jesus making the very same point that we find over and over here in the book of Ecclesiastes. We lay up our treasures here on this earth. We're really laying up our treasures for nothing. It's all going to come to nothing. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity, verse 2. So I'm going to be preaching about a bunch of nothing for a few Sunday nights in a row as we talk about the book of Ecclesiastes. The words of the preacher. Again, this is an introduction. I want to read the first 11 verses and then go back and use this section of text to introduce our study into this book. I do believe that the book of Ecclesiastes is one that is passed over. It's not nearly used as much as the books of Psalms or Proverbs. It's, however, a very important book. The lessons that are found in it are deep and important for us to grasp and understand. Beginning in verse 1, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit has a man from all his labor in which he toils under the sun? One generation passes away, and another generation comes, but the earth abides forever. The sun also rises, and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it arose. The wind goes toward the south and turns around to the north. The wind whirls about continually and comes again on its circuit. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. To the place from which the rivers come, there they return again. All things are full of labor. Man cannot express it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. That which has been is what will be. That which is done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which it may be said, see, this is new? It was already, or has already been, in ancient times before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of things that are to come by those who will come after. Again, that's going to be given as an introduction to this book. Ecclesiastes, the title of the book is derived from the Greek name, title, ecclesiastic, which means a teacher of an assembly. And the book is relatively small. It, nevertheless, has a lot of difficulties. In fact, as we just read the first 11 verses, you might have noticed some things that, there's not much of a consistent thought there. What in the world is he talking about? Well, we're going to talk about some of those things. And some of these difficulties, as we go through them, hopefully will become clearer to us all as we think about these things and we can properly make the application to our lives. It is a very practical book. We must keep the object and theme of the book in mind when analyzing it. Because when we begin to look at the book, we can become very pessimistic if we're looking at it from purely a materialistic or an earthly perspective, which the book is focused on things under the sun. And the point being, what's the profit of all the things under the sun? In fact, you accumulate everything that's under the sun. You accumulate all of the wealth that this world may hold. In the end, as Jesus said, if you gain the whole world, what have you profited? Nothing. That's it. But, of course, there's another side of this book, and that is to look at it through the spiritual eyes in which we, as believers in God, should see this world. And we're able to look at things differently. And I think this is very, very important for all of us as we're trying to serve God in this very materialistic age. Which, by the way, as Solomon says in this very first few 11 verses, there's nothing new under the sun. It's always been a materialistic world. It's always been a world where people focused on material things. But we need to see the things in this world from renewed eyes, spiritual eyes. We need, and by the way, the book reveals the actual value of material things, but the main point of the book is the importance of serving God throughout life and seeing the things in this world through God's perspective. That's very, very important. What is the true value of material things? Well, we've already said it's the key term that's found throughout this book. Vanity, it occurs 35 times in 29 verses. Futility, useless, nothingness. Vanity. The key phrase, though, under the sun. Looking at this world from an earthly perspective or considering the value of material things, what is going to happen to everything that's material eventually? It's going to be lost, isn't it? It's going to be destroyed. It's going to be consumed. Listen, you can have a full bank account, but when you stand before God on the day of judgment, it ain't going to matter. Nothing that you possess in this world is going to matter to you when you stand before God on the day of judgment. Not a single thing. Nothing. And you're not going to be concerned about it at all. You're not going to care about how much money you have in your bank account when you're standing before God. That'll be the furthest thing from your mind. This book illustrates the vanity of life when viewed and lived solely from a materialistic or earthly perspective, and tries to encourage us to see things from God's perspective. And as the conclusion of the whole matter winds up being expressed to us in chapter 12 and verse 13, fear God, keep his commandments, for this is man's all. That's the end. That's the conclusion. So just throw that out there at the beginning. Who's the author of this book? Of course, he calls himself the preacher, literally a teacher, a leader of an assembly. And Solomon is who I believe wrote this book. Certainly the wisdom and everything that is mentioned in this book certainly fits Solomon. His reign, chapter 1 and verse 12, and talking about the expanse of his kingdom and also the building activities and the wealth, all fit Solomon. Doesn't fit any other king that we know of. So, and the expression, the son of David, certainly Solomon was the son of David. Now, any king that was in the line of David could say that he's a son of David in an extended sense. And they did use that kind of language, but it all points to Solomon. And what does Solomon do in this book? He takes life and various aspects of life, various things in life, money and possessions, stuff he can acquire, power that he has accumulated, pleasures that he has enjoyed, earthly pursuits that he has chased down, even activities that include wickedness. He takes all of that and puts it in the test tubes of life. And he tries it out. While he keeps his wisdom, he tries all of these things out to see what is good for the sons of men. Of course, you may say, well, Solomon, why didn't you just listen to God? He'd have told you. And that's true. Solomon, you should have just listened to God. But what he is doing is he is experiencing all these things and showing us through experience that, you can pursue all of these things. And what do you find at the end of the road? Nothing. It's all worthless. He finds that. And so he presents all of his findings from two perspectives. One, from a naturalistic perspective, and thus that is going to be a very pessimistic and skeptical perspective. I mean, even righteousness and pursuing the things that are good in life He's going to say, well, look, a righteous man dies just like the wicked man does. So from an earthly perspective, guess what? It all appears to go to the same place. Even Jesus, look, what happened to him? He died on the cross. Now, Solomon didn't talk about that, but from that perspective, I think we can understand the point. Jesus died, and they were standing down at the foot of the cross saying, if you are the Son of God, come down and we'll believe in you. Well, and his very death on the cross solidified in their minds he wasn't the Son of God. Because look what happened to him. But listen, the righteous go to the same place that the wicked do. The tomb, the grave, the dust. But there's another perspective that we must remember. That is the spiritual perspective. God has revealed himself and told us things about even death that we need to understand. The spirit returns to God who gave it. Now, like the animals of the world, what happens? Well, they go to the ground. That's the end of them. No, all doggies do not go to heaven. No. But human beings do go back to God. Our spirits return to God who gave it. Our bodies do return to the dust of the ground and await the resurrection. We need to look at things through that spiritual revelation that God has given to us. We can't see those things, though, just through the natural perspective that we have. We rely on God's revelation to know these things. Answer these questions, for example, just from those two distinct perspectives, from a purely naturalistic perspective and from a spiritual perspective. Who am I? You'll have two different answers. If I answered it from a purely naturalistic perspective, well, I'm Don. I was adopted when I was 8 months old. I just found my birth mother just a few years ago. I learned that I had a grandpa who just passed away this past year, and I learned a lot about myself from a naturalistic perspective. But wait a minute, that really doesn't answer the question of who I am. Not really. Because if I look at it from a spiritual perspective, well, I was made in the image of God, just like everybody here. I'm given an eternal soul. I'm going to exist somewhere eternally. One day I'm going to stand before God and give an account to him. I need to answer these questions from a spiritual perspective. You see, we get two very different answers, depending on the perspective of which we're looking at the question. Where did I come from? Well, I found out I was conceived on Table Rock Lake. That's what I've learned that. But that's not really where I came from. I came from God. God made me. How do I look at these questions? Why am I here? Well, from a naturalistic perspective, I really don't know. But from a spiritual perspective, I understand. I'm here to serve God. I'm here to please him. That's what this book actually answers in the end, isn't it? What is my purpose in this world? To fear God and to keep his commandments. That's my all. And that's your all too. What am I to be doing? Fearing God and keeping his commandments. Where am I going? Well, I'm going to, as verse 14 of chapter 12 says, I'm going to appear before God. I'm going to be judged. And all of my secrets will be brought forth. Nothing will be hidden. I'm going to be existing somewhere forever. I'm either going to be in hell or I'm going to be in heaven with God. So it really is important how we look at life and how we even look at ourselves, isn't it? Very important. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. So what profit has a man from all his labor in which he toils under the sun? Why work so hard? I will also clarify something. Just because the preacher says vanity of vanities, all is vanity, he is not saying that the things in this world have absolutely no value while we're living in this world. While we're existing, the things that we have are to be used for God's glory, for his purpose. but in the end, they have no value. What remains of all of men's labor? Okay, what's the end result? That's really what he's asking. Now, if we use these things in the glory of God, to the glory of God and for his purpose, we're using them correctly. If we're not using them for his purpose, if we're using it for our own selfish ends, if it's our aim in life, our focus in life, if we're setting up our treasure or laying up our treasure on earth, what are we doing? We're filling our pockets full of dust. We're chasing the wind. We're not going to accomplish anything in life. And when we get to the end, it's going to be a wasted life. That is what he's saying. And he is emphasizing the things under the sun. All labor pertaining to it in search of material reward is ultimately worthless. If I gain the whole world and lose my own soul, what have I profited? So, in fact, this same statement, vanity, okay, is used in relationship to these things in this book. Toil, our labor, okay, right here in chapter 1. It's used, in fact, also in verse 14, chapter 2 and verse 11, chapter 2 and verse 17, chapter 4 and verse 4, verses 7 and 8. All of the labor, all the work that we put into our lives, as far as under the sun's concerned, work hard. What do you get? Work your fingers to the bone, and what do you get? Bony fingers. That's right. So all of these things that we work hard for, the wisdom even that we may possess, even righteousness, from an earthly perspective, the things that are done under the sun, righteous people go to the same place that wicked people do, as far as under the sun is concerned. In fact, you may even find it rougher sledding as a righteous person. You're going to suffer persecution. People aren't going to like you very much. You're going to have to be alone a lot. Wealth. You pursue wealth. You have wealth. You can't take it with you when you go. Popularity. Well, all your friends may sing your praises now, but the day's going to come when they forget who you are. Pleasure, you can pursue it, and you're going to wind up. You get too old that you can't enjoy things anymore. Even things that are right, good for you. There's nothing wrong with them in and of themselves. Our youth and vigor, I look back, and when I was younger, I was stout. I was very athletic. Not so much anymore. We just think about how, our life just, you're young, everything's going your way, and then in a blink of an eye, you look back, and that was 40 years ago? Wow. I couldn't do that today. You don't know how many times I think that. Verse 4 says, one generation passes away, another generation comes, but the earth abides forever. That concept of the earth abiding forever, the word olam is the Hebrew term there. What it means is as long as, or as an age lasting. For example, the Sabbath day was said to last forever. The priesthood, the Levitical priesthood, was to last forever. Same word. But we know that the Levitical priesthood came to an end. It was age lasting throughout the Mosaic age. As far as I could see is the idea. Well, the earth abides forever doesn't mean it's never going to be destroyed. I know that some use this passage and say, well, the earth will never be destroyed. That's not what Solomon's saying. What he's doing is he's making a comparative statement. The sun rises, the sun goes down, hastens to the place where it rose. By the way, we know that the sun doesn't literally rise, does it? The sun literally doesn't go down. We're not still in the earth coming around us. No, we know that we're revolving around the sun. We know that. The sun is stationary in the center of our solar system, although it's moving too. The whole solar system is moving. But we understand that this is accommodative language. The wind goes toward the south and turns around to the north. The wind swirls about continually and comes again on its circuit. Sitting on a deer stand, you're thinking, okay, I've got the wind in my face. I'm looking upwind. Deer's not going to smell me. And what happens? The wind turns around and goes right down where you're looking. That happens all the time. And it messes up your deer hunting. So I know all about that. Also, all the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. To the place from which the rivers come, there they return again. I wonder how Solomon knew about hydrology and the system, of how all that works. I think there may be a little explanation, or at least evidence here for inspiration. Solomon didn't learn this without some help from God. But again, this is a comparative statement. What Solomon is doing is pointing out the temporary nature of man. And, James even says this in James 4 and verse 13. What does he liken us to? A vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. When you compare us to the system that is around us, everything appears to go on and on and on while we just come and go. We need to, in fact, the Bible does talk quite a bit about, the life of a flower. That's what we're likened to. So we need to realize we are just pilgrims in this world. We're here just for a little while. And all that we engage in, all that we try to accomplish doesn't really amount to much if you just look at it from a materialistic perspective. We don't accomplish anything. We spend our time planting and gathering and taking care of each day. But in reality, you got to get up the next day and do it all over again. Every day you got to work. What if you stop? What if you just decided, I'm not going to work anymore. I'm just going to sit down and I'm going to do anything. What's going to happen? You know what's going to happen. You're going to starve to death. So we understand it. We have to keep going. We have to keep working, and we don't seem to get anywhere. And even as Solomon points out, all things are full of labor. Man cannot express it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor is the ear filled with hearing. We think about all of the great advances that we have made in technology. I was thinking about this afternoon. We have kids and grandkids, well, even those, of my generation. I mean, we've always had telephones, although, I remember the ones that, had the cords, actually attached to the wall. You plug them in, and had the long cords where you could walk around the room with it. Of course, my kids don't know anything about that. Our grandkids sure don't know anything about that. But how many thousands of years did humans exist without telephones? Wow. Hey, people, that might have just blown your mind. For the large part of human existence, no such thing as telephones. That's all just, last century. Almost 6,000 years of human existence, or more than 6,000 years of human existence with no phones. The internet hadn't been around very long. I remember when there was no internet. I remember when there were no cell phones. I remember when there were no computers that you could sit on your lap and sit back in your chair and work on. I remember there were no iPads, no tablets, except the ones with paper in them, with a pencil that you had to write in. Those are the kind of tablets I grew up with. Things change, and it's amazing how much we have advanced technologically in the last few years. Our parents, our grandparents didn't know about this. I mean, my dad, I got him an iPhone. He knows how to call people. That's about it. He don't know how to use anything else on the phone. Every time something goes wrong with it, he's either got to call me or he's got to call my brother, and we'll have to go fix it for him. I don't even want to talk about Denise's Aunt Ruby and her TV. That's well, okay. I've made my point, I think. We understand that we're blessed with so many new things, right? But in reality, I mean, all these things are just facilitating things that are necessary for life anyway. And in reality, we've always communicated, and we've had to communicate. We've had to talk with each other. We've had to do these things. We're just coming up with different ways to do it, but it won't be long, and that'll be an old fad as well. No, it's interesting. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. A greedy person is never satisfied, is he? A covetous person never gets enough. You know someone who is covetous and they start gambling and they just keep gambling and keep gambling and keep gambling, keep throwing their money away. We were on a cruise a few years ago, and the cruise director on the last day of the cruise, he said, I want to thank everybody who's gone to the casino. And I will say to you, my friend, I've never spent one penny in the casino, never stopped to slow down in casinos on a cruise ship. We've walked by them and just looked at all the people in there throwing their money in those computers or those games. But the cruise director said, I want to thank everybody for your contributions, those of you who went to the casino. And that's about what it is. You know, you're just going, the house always wins. You're throwing your money away. For what? Alcoholics never get enough. Drug addicts never get enough. And what do you get? What problems are solved? No, all you're doing is complicating your problems, making them worse. That's all alcohol and drugs do. Make things worse. Merle Haggard sings a song called Misery and Gin. You know, it looks like I'm having a good time, but any fool can tell. And you've got to realize these things are not good for you. They destroy you. But people think, you know, if I could just one more drink, you know, or fornication and adultery. I mean, you think this is fun? Well, just, you know, what does it do? Destroys families, destroys your life. Lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. You know, John said it this way in 1 John chapter 2 and verse 15. These things are not of the Father, but of the world. And the world is passing away, and all of its lust. But he who does the will of God abides forever. That's the message that Solomon is giving us right here. Okay, you continue to seek after these things. You can never get enough of materialistic things. And when a mind is focused on materialism, he'll never be satisfied. You can find and search for things in this world, and you will never find what you really need. What you really need is God. What you really need is him to fill your heart. And he needs to become your all in all, right? Things in this world will never satisfy you. They will always leave you feeling empty. And that which has been is what will be. That which is done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. So we'll look at all the inventions and things that we've accomplished the last 50 years. Quite a bit. But at the same time, I mean, what of these things have really changed us or changed who we are as human beings? None of them. We're always going to be looking for something else. It's never going to satisfy us. We're all the same constitutionally. You know, and in reality, I mean, Adam and Eve, going all the way back to the beginning, we're just like they were constitutionally. And sin still hurts just like sin hurt them. Pleasing God is the only thing that really matters. They found that out. We need to learn that lesson too. We need to realize that You know, Isaac said this morning in Bible class, he said he loves history, loves studying battle scenes and stuff in historical battles. And I said, that's great, Isaac. I think history is very important. In fact, be honest with you, I believe that history teachers are the most important teachers in school if they're teaching what's true history. You know why? Because people who are ignorant of history are destined to repeat it, right? It's important that we know what happened and learn from what has happened in the past so that we don't make the same mistakes they made. But we see that that's exactly what has happened historically. People forget what's happened in the past, and they do make the same mistakes over and over and over again. All that is done to satisfy or to provide for the basic needs that we have today, okay, use those things, that's fine. Enjoy those things, that's good. But we can never allow those things to become our focus, our treasure. It can never be the end all. What we have to focus on are the things that are spiritual in nature. And everything that we do have and everything that we learn, we need to use it for God's glory and for advancing our spiritual life. And this book helps us to understand that. We need to learn from history, from mistakes. Even Paul makes this point in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 1 through 13. He said, these things were written for our admonition. These things were written for our example. Verse 6 and verse 11. Okay, what things? Well, Israel, they were delivered out of Egyptian bondage. They went across the Red Sea on dry ground, and they were baptized under the cloud and in the sea unto Moses. God saved them from Egypt. But then, with many of them, God was not well pleased. Why? Because they turned away from God and they sinned against God. And Paul says these things are our examples. As Christians, we can learn from the failures of those that we read about in the Bible. You know what? That's why studying the Old Testament is important. Because we see where they made mistakes. Studying, of course, the scripture period is important. We see where Corinth was making mistakes, right? Where they were turning away from God. And we need to realize that we can make the same mistakes, and we need to examine ourselves in light of what has been. Just because things have been, we need to realize that we can do the same thing if we're not very, very careful. Think from a personal perspective. How many of you know your great-great-grandparents? Very few of us. And you didn't know them well. Yeah. How many of you will get to know your great-great-grandchildren? Time is going to keep marching on. And everything in this world basically is going to stay the same. Human beings are going to continue to be constitutionally the same. You're going to be forgotten just like those who have gone before us are going to be forgotten or have been forgotten. We need to think about that. We need to think about our temporal nature, that we're just pilgrims here, and that we need to live our lives diverting our attention from the things that are material to the things that are spiritual. We need to look at things from a spiritual perspective and understand and focus on the importance of serving God. We need to lay up for our treasures in heaven. So we need to realize all is vanity that is under the sun. It's all going to come to nothing. Everything that we may strive for in this world is eventually going to be lost. You can't take it with you when you go. We are simply pilgrims. And one day we are going to go. We can work and we can labor for things in this world, but all the time we spend for things here and now is wasted if that's our focus in life. Nothing in this world can really satisfy us. And the reality is there is nothing new under the sun. Everything continues as it was, and what has been will be. Our quality of life is only realized when we come to understand and we truly realize the futility of chasing the wind, chasing the world. My son had a dog, and that dog would chase his tail. And it would chase his tail for a long time, just round and 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 round. We sit there and laugh at that dog. That dog is so dumb, we think. But you know what? We do the same thing. We chase our tails. We chase the wind. We chase things that we can't catch. We waste our time. Why? We need to understand that there's something very much more important in this world, and that is God. We need to serve him, seek him out, and serve him with our whole heart. So that's what this book is going to be about, and we're going to look at different aspects as we go through. Very important lessons on worship and even death, and why do we have so many problems, and all those things are lessons that we find in this book that are needed. So hopefully it'll be beneficial to you. Thank you very much for your attention tonight. Maybe you're here and you've never rendered obedience to the gospel of Jesus Christ. I want to encourage you to do that. If you've never come to know him and serve him, you've never been baptized into him for the remission of your sins, why not now? Why not enter into him, into his body, and realize what this life is really all about, and find in him the hope of life everlasting. This world is going to end. You're going to come to the end of your road in this world. Make sure that you don't leave this world with nothing, because if you leave this world without Christ, that's what you've done. You've left with nothing. Don't do that. We can help you this evening. Won't you come while together we stand while we sing.